should call the speaker.
We'll get started. Or if you want to, I mean, however you want to talk about it. Five, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Trent England Show, this special edition as we are preparing our live coverage of the Governor's State of the State address, the Oklahoma 2018 legislative session kicking off just a few minutes ago. The House and Senate gaveling in, and now the House is waiting for the Senate to file into the House chamber, and then they'll all sit down together like one big happy family and listen to Governor Mary Fallin give her final State of the State address. I'm Trent England, your host for the next probably hour or so. We'll see. We'll see how long the speech goes. Will she try to stretch it out because it's her last one? Will she try to keep it short? I'm always a fan of short speeches. I don't understand why. I mean, we were talking about this with the State of the Union address last week. I do not understand why they stretch these things out so long rather than keeping them short. But, you know, that's just me. I guess if you're the one who gets to be up there on the podium, maybe things look, the world looks a little bit differently. We're going to just pick up the feed, and I will be back once things start to happen. But we'll keep the live stream going, and you can keep an eye on it, and we'll have all the live coverage you need coming up on the Trent England Show. Don't say anything you don't want to go out. Mike's live. Okay. Very good. We're back. Well, we've been here the whole time. We just had the mic turned off. We are here in the studio with the. So can folks see? This is, by the way, okay. So folks can see the picture in picture there. We've got the state of the state. Well, we're ready for the state of the state. They're not, but we are ready whenever it happens. I was just looking at some reports from Catherine Sweeney over at the Journal Record on a hearing before the House Investigative Committee this morning about information technology and federal funding. One of the things be interesting to see this session is how, I mean, obviously there are a lot of live issues. It'll be interesting to see whether the governor talks about the state health department scandal, and if she does, what she has to say about it. It should be the biggest story in Oklahoma politics right now. There's a federal investigation, there's a state criminal investigation, there's a state legislative investigation going on, and there are a lot of questions, and we've talked about these on the Trent England Show. There are a lot of questions about whether this is systemic, to what degree this is systemic through government, and the two data points we have to go on are not very reassuring. One is the claim, folks have said, well, the state health department is very different from other departments because it gets a mix of federal funds and state funds and local funds, and as we pointed out here on the show, that hardly makes it unique in state government. It actually makes it very much like our public school system, which has probably an even more complicated set of funding mechanisms. So that's not a very positive data point. When people are telling us, no, the state health department is totally different from other state agencies, nothing to see here, nothing to worry about beyond the state health department, and it turns out that the claims that they're making about that just aren't factual. They're not true. They don't either show an understanding of how state agencies are funded, or they show an interest in sort of just getting people to look the other way. The other data point that I would say we have to go on is the fact that, I mean, one of the questions for the executive branch and for the legislative branch is, are they serious about actually figuring out what went wrong, and are they serious about actually fixing what went wrong at the state health department? The legislature, to their great credit, has impaneled a committee, given the committee subpoena power, held serious hearings, collected documents. The legislature is actually, as far as what we know, they're taking this seriously. They're trying to do this job of oversight. And one of the best things I heard somebody saying this, I think last week, is we should have been doing this all along. We should have been doing this from day one. We should always be doing this. We should always have committees in the legislature exercising oversight authority with the ability to subpoena people, to subpoena records, to force people to show up and answer questions on the not just on the record, but answer questions after taking an oath, right, on penalty of perjury. Some legislators are saying we should always do this, and they're absolutely right. I mean, there's no reason for the state legislature not to do this as a matter of course, as a matter of oversight, and just doing its job. That's all good. What we have in the executive branch is not so good, because we have the appointment, we talked about this last week on the show, the appointment of somebody who has a stake in the Fallin administration. It's not an accusation of complicity. It's simply an observation of a really serious conflict of interest when somebody who has been an insider, has been so identified with the Fallin administration, is then put in the position of supposedly untangling what went wrong, when, one of the things we know is all of this started around 2011, Governor Fallin's first year in office. I mean, look, it's not an accusation of complicity, but conflicts of interest in this case are obvious and undermine at least the public perception that they're serious about trying to figure out what went wrong at the state health department. One of the questions that came up this morning is federal funding. And this is a really serious piece of the investigation into what happened at the State Department of Health, because the state of Oklahoma, you and me, could be on the hook to pay back federal money that was misspent at the Oklahoma State Department of Health. And there could be federal criminal charges, right? People could wind up in federal prison because they misspent federal dollars. And one of the things that the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs has been pushing for a number of years, it actually passed the legislature, bipartisan, big majorities in both chambers, transparency for federal funding, transparency for money that comes into state government from the federal government, setting aside the fact that, I mean, this is, in many cases, probably in most cases, blatantly illegal. If we care about if we think the Constitution's a law. I know a lot of people these days don't think the Constitution, it's not illegal, it's just unconstitutional. It doesn't violate, these laws made by, people over the last couple of decades. It violates this law that's been around for a long time and set up the framework that has allowed us to be successful as a nation. Why would we care about that, right? We care about it here on the show. And, but even setting that aside, right? The fact that federal money comes into the state of Oklahoma, comes into agencies, isn't tracked by the legislature. The strings attached are not tracked. It's not easy for taxpayers to find out what's going on in our government. A lot of this money is straight up bribery, right? It is money that the state can get for free if they agree to run policies, run programs in a certain way. We at least deserve to know about that. We at least deserve, our legislators deserve. They can't really make good policy without this information, but they don't have this information. So that passed in the legislature. Governor Mary Fallin vetoed that legislation, and we will see whether the legislature pushes something like that again this year, because this is the kind of transparency that would help prevent what happened at the State Department of Health. And I've heard people saying, and I mean, we don't have enough information to know what exactly was going on, but I've heard people say, it's suggestive when the governor vetoed this, now with what we know about the State Department of Health, it suggests that at least perhaps the people who were counseling her to veto that legislation perhaps were people who had something to hide in what was going on at the Oklahoma State Department of Health. So we finally have some audio from the House floor there, although still just milling around. Okay, we'll hear what they have to say.
The houses will come to order.
In other words, sit down. Sit down and be quiet. We'll see how long this takes. I already shared out, if you're watching this at our Facebook stream, I shared out the link. I did it earlier this morning as well from the morning show. The link to what may be, we'll see what the governor has to say, but may be
the houses will come to order. The
most important factual information to provide some context to the governor's speech today, and that is a comparison of the budget
Members
numbers
and guests, welcome to the first joint session
that Governor Mary Fallin
uses
versus the actual spending numbers for state agencies.
It is my pleasure to introduce the Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Oklahoma, Lieutenant Governor Todd Lamb, to preside over the joint session.
Thank you. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and honored guests. It's my distinct privilege to call the first joint session of the second regular session of the 56th Oklahoma Legislature to order. You may be seated, by the way. Senator Treat, you are recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the attendance roll call of the Senate be considered the roll call of the Senate in joint session.
Members, you've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Representative Eccles, you are recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the attendance roll call of the House be considered the roll call of the House in joint session.
Members, you've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. I hereby declare a quorum of the House and Senate present, and a joint session of the Oklahoma Legislature is duly assembled. Ladies and gentlemen, serving as our chaplain today for the joint session is Pastor Bill Leverage of Crossway Church in Sulphur, Oklahoma. Pastor Leverage is sponsored by Speaker Charles McCall. Would the members and guests in the gallery please rise as you are able for the invocation? Following the invocation, please remain standing for the posting of the colors by the Choctaw High School Air Force Junior ROTC. Pastor Leverage.
Would you pray with me?
Father in heaven, I want to acknowledge today your greatness above every name. I want to acknowledge your faithfulness to me personally and to our wonderful state and our great nation. Lord, I ask you to give these men and women your guidance and direction. We know that they have a very difficult task, and pleasing everyone will not be possible. Help them to put aside self-interest, petty differences that do not matter, and to stand firm on those things that do matter. Lord, that they could find common ground and work together for your glory and the good of the people. I pray that when they lay their heads down at night, they can be at peace, knowing that first and foremost they did what was right in your eyes. And secondly, that they did what was best for the people they serve. Lord, for the leaders of this distinguished group, give them vision, perseverance, and humility, that those who follow would be inspired by their devotion. Father, you know my heart. You know I agreed to come here for one reason today. That's to share your truth, that everyone may know that honoring you, knowing you, honoring you, loving you, serving you is what really matters. Father, that your truth would take root in us all. I thank you for that blessed hope that we have in the precious name of Jesus Christ. And all the people said, Amen.
Now the colors will be posted in the House chamber. This is the Trent England Show. If you're just tuning in, we have live coverage of the Governor Mary Fallin's final State of the State address. We are carrying it live on the Trent England Show, so we can provide you a little bit of commentary as it happens here, a little bit of context, and we have already done some of that by sharing out this post. It really is important for all of us who care about Oklahoma's budget situation. I know I talk to people from all kinds of different perspectives who are very concerned about the budget for some similar reasons, some different reasons. But
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Don't want to interrupt the Pledge of Allegiance there. But it is important to have good numbers, right? It is absolutely essential to have good. This is one of the reasons why political dialogue in the United States, not just in Oklahoma, has become, I think it's fair to say, more vitriolic. I was thinking this morning about when I was a kid, and average American. I mean, you always have pundits out there who are over the top, hyperbolic, right? But I remember when I was a kid, and most Americans liked Jimmy Carter, even if they didn't like his policies. Most Americans liked Ronald Reagan, even if they didn't like his policies. And today politics has gotten very bitter, and part of it is that we don't first come together around the same set of facts. We have a lot of people in politics who think they should just get to make it up. And so one of the things that we do on the Trent England Show is we try to put the facts in front of people, and everybody's entitled to their own opinions, but not their own facts. Here's back to
with us today. At this time, it is my privilege to ask these individuals to stand. Those that are members of the executive branch, statewide officials, and our tribal leaders in the gallery. Would you please stand either on the floor or in the gallery today so we can recognize you? Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to announce the arrival of the Oklahoma Court of Civil Appeals. Please stand as you're able as the House Sergeant at Arms escorts them into the House chamber.
I like these ceremonies because we get all three branches of government, and you have the legislature.
It's my distinct pleasure to announce the arrival of the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals. Please remain standing as the House Sergeant at Arms escorts them into the chamber. And
now the judiciary, what at the federal level we call the Article III branch, the judiciary. What in Oklahoma we call the fractured and unusual court. Where we have two high courts, a high court for criminal cases and a high court for everything else.
The Sergeant at Arms escorts them into the House chamber.
Oklahomans don't realize that we have essentially two Supreme Courts, which means this takes a little bit longer than in other states. One of the things that we're going to do on future episodes of the Trent England Show is look at, with the help of some of our friends who look at these things around the country, look at some different governors' state of the state addresses.
You are recognized for a motion.
Make some comparisons, compare and contrast.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House appoint members from the Senate and House, respectively, as a joint committee to notify the governor that the first regular session of the 56th Oklahoma Legislature is assembled in joint session, ready to receive her and hear her message.
Thank you, Senator Treat. As President of the Oklahoma Senate, I am appointing the following senators to serve on the Governor's Escort Committee: Senator Bice, Senator Pugh, and Senator Sparks. Speaker McCall appoints the following representatives from the House: Representative Baker, Representative Nolan, Representative Sears. The chair recognizes Senate Sergeant at Arms Bob Craig for an announcement.
So the governor is making her way into the chamber, and we will have the State of the State address, Governor Mary Fallin's final State of the State address, here in just a moment. Don't worry. The applause will not be as long as they were if you watch the State of the Union address. This year's State of the Union address was had a lot of applause. I don't think we're gonna. I'm not saying anything derogatory. I'm just saying these things usually are a little more a little quicker at the state level than at the federal level.
members of the legislature, fellow officials, guests in the chamber, on the floor, in the gallery today, and fellow Oklahomans, may I present to you the governor of the great state of Oklahoma, Governor Mary Fallin.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Lieutenant Governor Lamb, statewide elected officials, Speaker McCall, President Pro Tem Mike Schultz, members of the court, honorable senators and representatives, cabinet members, statewide elected officials, and our tribal leaders that have joined us here today, and most of all, the great citizens of the state of Oklahoma. Welcome. It's good to have you all here. It is my honor to present the second regular session of the 56th legislature, my State of the State address, and the final one of my administration. I gotta give myself a cheer on that one. I'd like to take a brief moment to thank my fellow Oklahomans for the great honor and the opportunity of a lifetime to serve as the governor of the great state of Oklahoma. My family and I have really loved traveling across the state, meeting all kinds of outstanding Oklahomans. And words cannot express how much I appreciate the sacrifices of my entire family, their love and their support over the many years that I have served the state. And that includes my loving husband, who filled the shoes as the first gentleman of the state of Oklahoma. He deserves a round of applause for that. And our combined 6 children. 2 of our children have joined us here today. Fallin, who was 3 years old when I sat in the back of that chamber, second to the last row, right up this aisle, whoever's sitting in my seat there, as a freshman legislator, and my son, Price, who was 4 months old when I started my legislative career. He's out of state right now on a business trip, of course, as he's older now. I also have with me my stepson, Adam, and his wife, Elizabeth Christensen, have joined us here today. Thank you guys for coming. I also want to express my deep gratitude to my extended family, and that extended family includes 3 different groups. First, my faithful prayer partners, and there are many who are in this room. Thank you so much for your love and support and your prayers. My cabinet members and my staff, both past and present, that have joined us here today. Cabinet members, staff that are here today, thank you for your devotion and your service to the state of Oklahoma. I really appreciate you over these years. Thank you so much. And my informal advisory board, now these are composed of dozens, maybe even hundreds of people who intercept me down on Northwest 23rd when I'm getting a Diet Coke at On Cue. They make sure that I slow down and that I listen to their wisdom and their concerns and a little bit of common sense they like to share with me, my fellow Oklahomans. I also want to thank our legislators and our other elected officials who have joined us here today. Thank you for all of your hard work and your service and your sacrifice to the state. We know it takes a tremendous amount of time away from your family and your job, and we appreciate you. Now, we set many goals since 2011. We've accomplished much, but there are still many more opportunities ahead of us. And legislators, it's great to see you back again. which I know hasn't been very long ago. What's it been, about a month now? But we're glad to have you back here. And seriously, I do appreciate your service to the state, your time and your efforts during this past year, and agreeing to come back for 2 calls of my special sessions. I appreciate that. I feel we are making great progress, but I do understand it's been very challenging. It's been very difficult this past year for all of you. So thank you for your service. Glad to have you back here. Now, tradition tempts me to take this opportunity to reflect on the past 7 years of what has been my blessing to be able to serve as governor of the state we all love. But today is not for yielding for tradition. Today is not to look over our shoulder and think about the past, but today is a day that we press forward for a better future for the state of Oklahoma. And that, my friends, is the last you're going to hear me talk about today, the previous 7 years of my service as governor. And let's focus on the future and make sure that we recognize and embrace the opportunity we have in front of us. You know, the Constitution of the state of Oklahoma makes it my duty today to provide a budget and to report on the health of our state. Neither duty, however, will be fulfilled by what I say here. The budget and the health of our state are not mine to determine. Instead, both will be decided by what this legislature does in the next couple of weeks. Let's make no mistake about it. This is an historic, defining moment before us. What we do as a unified group of people elected by the citizens of our great state could be considered the moment in time that changed Oklahoma. We are in a very unique period as this legislative session begins with a concurrent special session. We also are at a special time in Oklahoma's journey because of the prospect of a brighter path forward is so very near. Only in Oklahoma would a group of private business and community leaders that care enough to work so tirelessly in a bipartisan manner to sculpt a series of budget and reform compromises that could bring new life into the entire state and put us on a better course. Only in Oklahoma can we gather in this house of the people to demonstrate yet again what we know is at the heart of Oklahoma. The basic truth is this: when the hardest challenges come, when a crisis threatens, that's when Oklahomans as one rise up to show our state, our nation, and the world what we have always loved and called the Oklahoma Standard.
I think the challenge for the governor there is that she's talking about a relatively small group of
It
Oklahomans.
is our solemn duty to raise up the torch and to show again the Oklahoma Standard lives. And when the people say we can't do it, when we can't solve our budget, we can't solve our budget our budget crisis, and we can't give our teachers a pay raise, or we can't bring better accountability, let's show the people of Oklahoma we can. Tradition also tempts me again to now talk you through all the elements of the budget package that you'll be considering. Instead, the proposed budget is detailed and the materials have been provided to each of you. But now we are all familiar with the choices before us, with a Step Up Oklahoma plan. Yet for all of us, there are, frankly, are parts of it, what is proposed, that we may want to embrace, and there are parts that we may want to reject. But our goal this session should be to fix the chronic budget crisis, address the important policy goals that are in front of our state. There are no perfect solutions or plans. We know there is no perfect legislation. We also know that compromise is at the very core of the budget on which you will vote. Just as compromise formed the foundation of America, I believe compromise can fortify the foundation of Oklahoma. As we consider recurring revenue, let's be clear. It's not revenue alone that gets us to a place of budget stabilization. We have to include reforms as well. My budget includes money for agency performance and accountability efforts, which will ensure the public confidence and help us bring forth the resources that need to be spent appropriately and to be able to address the public confidence that we have lost a little bit of in our state governments. That accountability, that transparency will go a long ways. But we also have to remember that our state is at a crossroads. The actions that we take will be a game changer. It's time to decide what future we want our families and our children to have. One path would be to continue year after year with the air of uncertainty that consumes our thoughts, drains our hopes, like the old saying, robbing Peter to pay Paul.
This is a fascinating speech for a governor to give in her last year in office.
You heard that before? If we are to effect change, we can't keep doing the same old thing.
Sorry to talk over the governor, but it sounds very much like the kind of speech you would hear when someone is coming into office after, in the wake of an unpopular predecessor, rather than someone trying to finish out 2 terms as governor.
Frankly, the more chaos at the Capitol. We have to ask ourselves, what kind of future do we want to have? Do we find it acceptable to have 4-day school weeks? Is it acceptable for Texas to steal our teachers and leave our classrooms short of teachers?
Painful that a state with no income tax is able to steal teachers away from Oklahoma.
So do we just accept that a budget fix, that we just have to cut things like rate cuts and other essential health and human services for the needy and our most vulnerable citizens? Is that what we just accept? Is that good enough? Do we believe the only solution to helping our mothers and our fathers, our sons and our daughters and our friends who are not violent but need substance abuse treatment, do we believe that the answer to that problem is just to warehouse them in prison? Or will our state be more successful if we help them put their families back together, get jobs, and become taxpayers? Or do we just think this is how it is, and it's the best Oklahoma can do? No, absolutely not.
I mean, this is not to get too political, but I mean, this is the kind of speech that you could imagine. You could imagine a Drew Edmondson giving a year from now.
We must do better, and we need to dig down deep in our souls and recall the Oklahoma standard of neighbor helping neighbor, as we did during the Murrah federal bombing tragedy. We need to restore the attitude that we are Oklahoma strong. We can fix it like we felt after the Moore tornadoes. We all joined in and we fixed it. And in the face of crisis, Oklahomans come together and they solve the problem. The people of Oklahoma expect excellence and demand that we solve our state's problems. And frankly, that is why we were elected. To lead, to roll up our sleeves, get to work, solve the problems, find solutions. And this is a defining moment for our state. We have 2 clear choices. We can continue down the road with a path of sliding backwards, or we can choose a second path, which is to say, enough is enough, we can do better, we deserve better, our children deserve better too. This is a great opportunity to address our ongoing challenges to strengthen our state's image and, frankly, our state's brand. Think about our image and think about our brand when we constantly have these budget crises that we've been experiencing. Now, as we all know, close to 100 fellow Oklahomans from across the state have developed a plan called the Step Up Plan. And it's designed to put our state on a fiscally stable path to bring much needed reform, to give our teachers a $5,000 pay raise, and frankly, to break the gridlock that's existed in this building. We don't want to be like Washington, D.C. And because of the urgency of this situation,
I think they just passed a big
this
tax cut in
outside
Washington,
group in a very short
D.C.
period of time has endorsed both reforms and some revenue. They support ideas that frankly are against their own financial interests in order to further the state's interests. They have come together to help this legislative body unite behind a plan to move Oklahoma forward, and they did it because they love Oklahoma. We love Oklahoma. So now is our time to step up, to be courageous, to do our job, and to pass this plan. Now, without passage of this plan, there are important policy initiatives that can't be advanced, initiatives that each of you care about, such as education, criminal justice reform, health, human services, transportation infrastructure, and restructuring inefficient government entities. We can't do that unless we stabilize and fix our budget. And that is why 5 former Oklahoma governors, who are all still with us, Republican and Democrat, have endorsed the Step Up Plan. They have shown us what it's like to decide partisan differences and to join together for the good of our state. So now is our time to act. No more delaying, no more putting things off, no more kicking cans down the road, no more addressing long-term budget problems with short-term fixes. We can do this, and we must do it now. Now, Governor George and I said of the Step Up Plan, he said, quote, it would help our state break free from the boom and bust cycle that harms all Oklahomans. He said, the very nature of compromise means that Oklahomans are on both sides of the aisle, may not like everything in the plan, but we must come together as Oklahomans and move past partisan politics that stand in the way of progress. Governor Frank Keating said, paralysis and dysfunction are not credible public policy. Revenue failures damage the credibility of the state. The civic and business leaders have thrown us a lifeline, as Governor Keating. I will conclude with some final thoughts because I just think this is so important that this is a time that we have to get to work and have to have action. Now, we talked a lot and a long time about permanent solutions for our budget crisis. We debate a lot of things. In fact, members of this legislature will cast votes on the budget, and the days are short ahead of us. My prayer will be for you to remember our fellow Oklahomans and remember their hopes and their dreams of a prosperous state. Before you cast your vote on any issue, focus on things like a teacher who will see a $5,000 pay raise, not just as a way to pay that teacher's bills, but a way to validate their vital vocation. And remember the business community that sees how committed we are to a strong, educated workforce. Or perhaps as you reach for that vote button on your desk, you may want to picture in your mind a caregiver who seeks the state's help so the elderly mother or father that can't live on their own but are living out their final years will have security and will have dignity in their life. Or as you...
So just looking at the governor's budget book here during her speech, there is not a single area of government that she calls for reduced spending, which follows a trend from a pattern from last year.
And that of an entire
Everything either
generation
stays
of
flat or
Oklahomans
gets bigger.
rests with the decision you will make if we appropriately fund education. Remember the important policy initiatives we have implemented already. Smart on crime for treatment with those that have abuse or mental health issues and how that affects our state's success. And by the way, too few Oklahomans are getting the treatment they need for substance abuse and mental health issues and are instead winding up in our criminal justice system. We need to stop warehousing moms and dads and sons and daughters in prison when many just need some substance abuse treatment.
Budget proposal, a $130 million personal income tax increase.
See, we can unite together. Public safety. Now, there are bills that have been proposed by Oklahoma Justice Reform Task Forces that can safely and prudently fix our criminal justice system. So send those bills to me and I'll sign them. As you're beginning to vote, remember all the good image that Oklahoma has when we invest in our infrastructure, how important it is to business. Remember our desire for safe homes and communities when we make decisions this session that may affect or may not affect our prison population, which is at 112% capacity. Remember the great policy strides we made to enact a plan to meet the needs of abused or abandoned children. We have more safe, loving foster care homes now because of the work we've done. In fact, Oklahoma has the highest number of gains in foster care homes in the nation right now. Ronald Reagan once said, and he reminded us, that America is too great for small dreams. Friends, Oklahomans deserve more than small dreams. They need solutions. They need solutions that will allow their big dreams to come true. It's a rare opportunity to bring forth
We're having some issues with the feed from the Oklahoma House of Representatives, but we will get that back and going. There we go.
They need solutions. They need solutions that will allow their big dreams to come true. It's a rare opportunity to bring forth an enduring reality to a promising future. Oklahomans deserve nothing less. Now is the time to summon the courage. Now is the time to invest. Now is the time to do work. Let's make Oklahoma a special place where our children and their children choose to live. May God guide you as you vote. May God bless you, and may God bless Oklahoma. Let's get to work.
Okay, so I have shared out in the comments the governor's budget book. That is her budget proposal required by the Oklahoma Constitution to be provided at the beginning of the legislative session. And as I mentioned before, like last year, it does not call for any area. Maybe we can just bring the volume from the feed down a little bit. There's nothing else of real importance that's going to go on there. We can continue watching what they do on the House floor. But the governor's budget, and this has been the case. I haven't looked at every single budget, but most of the governor's budget proposals have followed this position that nothing in government can ever get smaller or go away. Now, the legislature has not always followed that. The legislature has actually prioritized some areas of government over others, has actually identified some areas of government that ought to be able to become more efficient. That is to say, actually spend less money year over year. So the legislature has done that, but the governor always starts out the legislature in this position where the assumption is everything in government should stay exactly the same size as it is right now or get bigger, in some cases much bigger, and that, as I say, is in the governor's budget proposal again this year. What else is in the governor's budget proposal? A $129.2 million personal income tax increase. She borrows the language from this income tax, from this tax package, calling it simplification of individual income tax. I've ridiculed that on the show before. I'm not going to change my tune just because the governor threw it in her budget book. It is absolutely bizarre that they call this simplification. Words mean things. It doesn't make the tax code any simpler. Even the far left analyst David Blatt at the Oklahoma Policy Institute, the liberal policy group up in Tulsa, even David Blatt says it doesn't make the income tax simpler. It makes it more complicated, more confusing. The only people who say this makes the income tax simpler are people who are trying to sell the plan, who apparently don't understand the details. And look, you can make public policy more complicated and it could still be good policy, but calling it simplification is just insulting to people's intelligence. It adds 2 new tax brackets. It changes a whole bunch of it doesn't make it simpler. Even the description in the governor's budget book makes that clear. What else is in here? An expansion of gambling in Oklahoma is here. Not surprising to see expanded gambling combined with conversations about education funding. That seems like has happened before. Obviously, if you expand gambling in Oklahoma, you're going to solve all the education funding problems. I mean, I don't know how many times that's been done before, but that makes the governor's budget book this time. Let's see, what else do we have in here? A gross production tax on wind energy, increases to the gas tax and diesel tax, increased taxes on chewing tobacco, little cigars, increased taxes on cigarettes, the $1.50 increase in cigarette taxes. That obviously makes the top of the governor's list of tax hikes here.
Eccles, you're recognized for a motion.
We've seen before. Could not get enough votes last year in the legislature. They had to call it a fee and pass it. Obviously, it was illegal, got struck down by the courts, and that is what really led to the special sessions that the legislature has been in. As we pointed out on the program before, you increase the cigarette tax in Oklahoma by $1.50 additional, and you do 2 things that are very predictable. One is you push that up beyond any of our surrounding states. Actually, the nearest state that would have a tobacco tax that high would be Minnesota. So you probably would have a lot of people going out of state to buy their cigarettes or to tribal smoke shops, which they actually get a rebate. 50% of the tobacco tax that they ostensibly pay gets rebated back to them, and in some cases literally turned into subsidies for selling cigarettes at tribal smoke shops. So that's that we've talked through that policy on the Trent England Show before. You also have raising the gross production tax from 2% to 4% on wells in their first 3 years, their first 36 months. This is one of the really interesting pieces of the conversation going into the legislative session, because hanging over the heads of some folks like a sword of Damocles is this state question proposal. It's going to litigation, but if it gets through litigation, they'll start collecting signatures for it. It would add 5% to the gross production tax for the first 36 months, no matter what the gross production tax is. Some people, we have chastised the media for this. Some people have said, oh, it would raise it to 7%. Well, that's only if the existing rate is 2%. If the legislature takes it to 4%, then this state question would raise the gross production tax on those wells to 9%. And when I pointed that out on social media, I had one legislator saying, this is really important. I hope people are paying attention to this. And I had one left-wing activist saying 9% sounds like a good start. So that's a conversation that's going on out there right now. And if you've been watching the Trent England Show about all these things, you know more than anybody else does, as far as I can tell, because a lot of these facts, a lot of this background hasn't been pointed out in the mainstream media out there. So the State of the State is wrapped up there. The House feed is wrapped up. The legislative session is off and running. We will be back with you at our usual time, not tomorrow, but a little bit of travel this week. But through almost every single day of the legislative session, we will be right here at 9 a.m. every single weekday with the best of the bills, the worst of the bills, what's going on the floor, what's going on behind the scenes. We will share all that with you. If you have tips for us. We get a lot of great tips from people who watch, who listen, people who subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. If you have tips, send them my way. You can go to the Facebook page and you can send that information in, the Trent England Show Facebook page, the OCPA Facebook page. Send that information to me. We love to get that. If you have thoughts, suggestions, bills you want us to feature, send all that my way. And this has been the Trent England Show, special broadcast of the State of the State address here on the kickoff day for the Oklahoma State Legislative Session 2018. Thanks so much for watching.